You're watching The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
What's up, the internet? We're doing this from my phone from the office, as you can see, microphone there and all that kind of stuff, because my internet went out right as we were about to go live, and I'm trying to get it fixed, but it's not working. So, in the meantime, there's this rich history in the world of questions, right? So, like, you have old-timey questions, like, do you know the way to Tipperary? And, who wrote the Book of Love and things like this. And then there's more modern questions like, have you heard about the bird? And how many lows could Rob Lowe rob if Rob Lowe could rob lows? And so today we're going to answer your questions on this, our first AMA episode. And hopefully by the time the opener plays, I'll be on this computer, on this screen, and not on this one. Cross your fingers. This is Devil's Advocates.
Hey, what's up?
Hello, the world down there.
So our first question.
We were talking before the show about how the show must go on.
Yes, exactly. And our first question is, why does technology hate us so much?
So my car broke today too.
Oh no.
Like, I'm just having a day.
I'm sorry, man. That seems to be how it goes for me too. You know, you don't just get one terrible thing. They say they come in threes, right? And we have Kyle over there frozen. So hopefully that means he's switching over computers. He'll probably come in the middle of a sentence or something here in a second. But yeah, let's see. We got the loading screen. Here we go. We got live picture again. Or we did. But yeah, so this is our first AMA. Kind of get the ball started here. Just to let you know in the chat, if you ask a question in the chat, unless you're super far afield, we're going to answer it because we're your captive question answerers right now. And we'll kind of let Kyle figure out if this configuration is going to go here or not. Literally every time I say everything's going okay, Kyle, your connection looks terrible. Like reverse logic, that means it's going to start working, right? So yeah, we do have a bunch of questions we want to answer tonight. We also will probably go over, at least on my side of things, a couple of things that I get frequently asked I can talk about too, if we need to talk about some more stuff. For right now, it looks like it's just me on the big screen here. So yeah, so the first thing I'll say is technology and streaming has been an adventure. I know a lot of the people in the chat right now used to see me on my old live streams when I had like my old computer. And towards the end of that computer's lifespan, I was having so many problems streaming live that I actually kind of switched. I quit streaming live for a good chunk of time just because of that. I finally started getting back into it. And it is a very frustrating experience. Apologize to the viewers that are kind of dealing with it right now. But hey, as we talked about backstage before the show must go on. So I'm going to hop in and check out the chat here real quick. Say hi to everybody. We had GT Key Comic, always in the chat. Really appreciate that. Thank you, GT Key Comic. Got Leonard in the chat. Howdy to you, Leonard. Thanks for joining us tonight. Preston, always another great person to have in the chat. Thank you very much, Preston. And Buddy, you're just going to remind me right now that we need to take a second. I say this because Buddy is a veteran, not for the obvious reason, but it reminds me of the fact that it's Memorial Day. And Memorial Day is a day to honor the fallen, and I just want to take a second to make sure that we all kind of acknowledge that throughout the day. It's very important. It's something I take pretty seriously. So just want to say thank you to everybody that's sacrificed themselves for us, and an additional tack-on thank you to everybody who serves. Looks like Mark is going to entertain us with a theatrical. Oh, sorry, I thought it said theatrical. A theoretical scenario. That should be pretty interesting. Got Eddie Von B in the house. Changed your last name there at the last second. Preston trying to quote Monty Python at us. Is it a West African swallow? Depends, right? Yeah. Next question. That's awesome. Wow. So Kyle went to a different address to join us live. That's great.
I actually just came outside of the studio.
Nice.
For whatever reason, my internet is not connecting to the server. And then when I'm in the office, I don't have enough reception to do this. So I had to come out of the office. So we don't have a phone line tonight because, well, my phone is my computer.
So yeah, we will get to all those questions if you got them. This is a good time to drop them into chat. Yeah, see, Eddie was knew where I was going. African or European swallow? There you go. Okay, first real question coming through. No, I'm sorry, not real question. First comic book related question.
Well, and Leonard actually was the only person to submit a question beforehand.
Yeah, we'll get to that one for sure. It was a good question too. So Leonard, I appreciate the questions. Thank you so much. Your question that you asked is the lamest member of the Justice League. That is a fantastic question. The lamest member. Man, that's tough too because there's so many people. It's kind of like I'm reminded of the Avengers, of course. Like there's a lot of people that were Avengers at one point, and you can really grab some D-list characters out of that. Justice League is pretty similar. I'm gonna switch it up and go for like the core Justice League, like the main, was it 7 or so? And so I think the debate comes down to Aquaman. Very powerful in his own element, right? So when I say the core Justice League, I'm talking Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Cyborg, Green Lantern. Yeah, kind of the modern lineup, right? That people think of. And out of that lineup, it might be Aquaman for me. I'm kind of tempted to almost say like Cyborg because he's same thing. He's kind of specialized. If it's a tech related thing, he's awesome. Batman's just good at everything. Superman's good at everything. Wonder Woman's pretty damn good at everything. Flash is super fast and OP. Green Lantern, pretty OP. If you stop and think about his powers, he can do whatever he wants. Yeah, I think I'm going to go core Justice League, and my answer is going to be Aquaman. How about you, Kyle?
Yeah, I'm going to go with anyone with Aqua at the beginning of their name.
Any water-related powers. Now, I mean, the thing that's going to suck is I'm going to say that. They're going to go to Aquaman, and they're going to be like, sorry, man, we got to do it. You're off the team. The merch sales just aren't where we need them to be. We need somebody with more social media presence. And then, of course, some kind of crazy water invasion is going to happen. Some aliens from their planet that are waterborne, and they're going to need Aquaman back. That's going to be how it goes. Aw. Preston, his feeling that's so hurt he left again. So Preston says he's finally looking up to you, Kyle. Never thought that would happen. What's up, Thomas? How's it going? Yeah, if Kyle was a member of the Justice League, he would be Captain Cold, which I know is the wrong reference for that. He would be he'd be Ice, right? There we go.
The Internet Man.
Internet Man. Love it. He's a mime tonight. Okay, let's see here. Dial-up versus high speed side by side. Oh man, that's funny. Yeah, Eddie, so my shirt, it is move my beard out of the way here, the Millennium Falcon, and then that's the Finalizer. I just adjusted my chair at the wrong time. The Finalizer from the sequel trilogy. I love the top half a lot more than the bottom half, but there is actually a Lego Finalizer sitting right here next to me that we will pull down, because why not? So if you don't know what I was talking about, it's one of these. One of these is on the shirt. So yeah, that is what it is. Great question. Okay, so Preston asks, after the first trailer for The Flash dropped, there seemed to be a buzz about the movie. Now it seems as if interest has waned. Do you think that was due to the new DC regime or something else? Great question. Great question. Kyle, are you still kind of in troubleshooting mode, or are you ready to dive into an
I'm
answer?
leaving the office to try to find more stable internet because I didn't drive 6 hours today to do this show to be defeated by T-Mobile.
Not a sponsor. Probably not going to be one of this
McDonald's parking lot and steal theirs or something.
They might be a sponsor as much as we love food on this show.
I can answer the question though.
Cool.
In my opinion, the problem is Ezra Miller. The problem is that there's so much drama associated with the Flash movie that the Flash movie could be the greatest movie ever made, and it could be the next English Patient, and people are going to hate it because Ezra Miller.
Yep, that's a huge part of it. I mean, the other thing too is you're kind of, I've called it this before, you're in this lame duck period of the DCU. I mean, it used to be called the DCEU. Now they're calling it just the DCU, which is a better name. It's really this thing. Same thing happened. Same thing is going to happen to Aquaman 2, probably. All these movies that we know they're not part of the new continuity. I think the one that has a chance to be an exception to that is Blue Beetle, because Blue Beetle is a character that we're not used to seeing on the big screen. Even the Flash is still a relatively new thing. I mean, this is really technically the Flash's first, mainstream movie, of course. But we've seen the Flash before on a lot of different media. Blue Beetle is a character I think a lot of people aren't familiar with. They're like, oh, it's kind of a cool superhero. It's something new. Let's see what's going on. I have a feeling that one will do better. But you have the other problem with being part of this lame duck period, which is, and this is related to what Kyle said, this is directly related to Ezra Miller, is that it's been delayed now for so long that any movie that seems to have production troubles, that seems to kind of languish in, is it going to release or not? Think about New Mutants. Think about the Snyder Cut. They enjoy a momentary success, but they do have kind of this almost stigma around them where people, it's like one of those old school cartoons where you can see the stink lines coming off the movie a little bit, even if it's a great movie, even if it is a fantastic film, which it very well could be. I know a lot of people are saying that have seen it, that even Ezra Miller delivers an okay performance or a good performance in some cases. People are saying Michael Keaton's a really good performance. We're not going to go into spoiler territories or some of the stuff I've heard, but there is definitely some buzz around this movie. But I think it kind of goes to show that James Gunn really has his work cut out for him over on the DC side of things. That was awesome for a second. I never thought about cloning myself to join myself as a co-host.
I have another thought that I was going to say before the internet so rudely interrupted me again.
Sure.
One of the other problems that the Flash is going to face, as I stick my hand over the camera because I don't know where it's at anymore, is Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
I don't believe that as long as people think Zack Snyder is the greatest thing since sliced bread to ever happen to DC movies, that any DC movie will be successful.
Yeah.
It's this idea of, again, as like I said before, you could make the English Patient. You could make, Bridge Over River Quiet. It's not going to matter because it's not Zack Snyder.
It's a weird thing too, because look, maybe Zack Snyder had this grand vision for where all these films would have went, and it would have been amazing, and we'd all be looking at it like it's, the lead up to Infinity War right now in the Marvel equivalent. But that is a lovely sound, by the way. There we go. But when it comes to what Zack Snyder actually delivered, there's a huge fan base he has. Kyle's 100% right. But yet there's also this huge opposite base. It's these movies weren't that great. I mean, think about how much lampooning happened with the whole Martha, Batman versus Superman thing too, right? And it's such a great question because there's so many layers to it. Because Zack Snyder, while he's got his fan base that wants him involved again in what's going on and wants to see that vision carried out, there's also this kind of like blame you could almost lay at his feet for part of how the DC is kind of where it's at right now. The DC movies are kind of where they're right now, because there's a lot of people that weren't enjoying them. Man of Steel, tons of criticism, like he destroyed the whole city. Superman doesn't kill. Just all these different kind of things. Lex Luthor, his version of Lex Luthor that was in the movies, got lampooned a lot. I think some of the only good things that came out of the Zack Snyder kind of creation were the first looks at Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, which was fantastic. And for her first movie, I know the third act was kind of a letdown, but fantastic film. And Aquaman was successful. Now, obviously, those weren't Zack Snyder films, those first two films, but they were a continuation of the work that he kind of laid the groundwork for. So it's really interesting. I wonder, in a different reality, if Joss Whedon had never gotten involved with Justice League, what it would have looked like at the end of the day. I mean, I know there is the Snyder Cut. I don't know that that's really like the definitive version of the film that it would have been. I think that's kind of the best they could do without doing like extensive reshoots is kind of my opinion on that. We'll see if, he backs that up ever, but yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot going on, and I do think that it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to DC as we move forward. We have a couple more of those Elseworlds, is what they're calling them, kind of, which is, by the way, that's brilliant. That was a brilliant move to label those Elseworld stories. We have a couple more of those coming out, and they're going to continue making them, from what I understand. And then there's also just going to be that core new movie, and so much of it. Was it Man of Tomorrow? Is that what he's calling his Superman film?
Superman. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's something like that. That so much is going to hinge on that, and I'm glad. He's coming off of a lot of success. People generally liked Guardians of the Galaxy 3. That'll probably help quite a bit. We'll see.
Superman Legacy.
There we go.
Not a great name, by the way. I'm just going to throw that out there.
It's not. Man of Tomorrow actually probably would have been a better name.
I think Disney owns that. Wasn't that a Tomorrowland thing? Like,
oh, yeah, maybe that could be. By the way, we got producer Jay chiming in with Shining Knight was his answer for the Justice League question there. So there we go.
Yeah, worst Justice League is anyone with Aqua in the name, or at this point, Internet Man.
Internet Man's terrible.
We're gonna see if I can steal Internet from the library.
I think that his sidekick Modem Mangler is pretty bad too.
That's clearly attacking me today.
Guy Gardner is lamest for me, says Preston, and that's, what? Ever since Guy Gardner debuted, I was always like, what the hell is with this guy? Like, as being not mostly a DC guy and picking up a few books here and there, just bowl cut guy with rage issues is all he ever was to me until I learned a little bit more about his character. But that's a good answer. Yeah, no arguments for me, Thomas. You're absolutely right.
Leonard had a question. He submitted a question before the show.
Yeah, you want to talk about that real fast?
Yeah, his question was, what is a comic crossover that you would like to see?
Yeah, and that's such a fantastic question, Leonard. Both your questions were on point. Very good comic book nerd questions, things we can debate for forever. So for me, I mean, my favorite stuff ever is the X-Men. So I'm going to want to see an X-Men crossover. But the one I've always wanted to see, and I think it's like the end all be all of like what if crossover kind of things for most people. And I think it probably trumps even my X-Men answers. And I'd love to see it in a movie, of course. It'll never happen. So a comic book would be fun. Star Wars versus Star Trek. I just would love to see it. I'd love to see it. Do you have an answer?
So I do. And it's a weird kind of thing. Have you seen the episode of Parks and Recreation where Patton Oswalt is filibustering a law change in the city of Pawnee? And he goes on this big long rant. that connects George Lucas's Star Wars universe to the Marvel universe by way of Galactus.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I
For
want
sure.
that.
That'd be fun.
Or some version of that, right? I want, there was this idea when Disney bought Fox, like there's a meme that went around, Corporal Klinger's a Disney princess now. I want these things. I want them to start I would love to see comic books or movies or short animated films, whatever, tying the universe together. So this is how Star Wars connects via Peter Quill to, the Marvel universe. And this is how the Marvel universe connects to the Fox stuff.
Interesting.
And, even if even if there's a disclaimer, this is not canon. Don't care, want the stories.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. So my X-Men related one that I could come up with, because honestly, I don't really want to see the X-Men crossover with, like, we already said X-Men and Teen Titans. I mean, that was great, especially for the time it came out. You could almost make like maybe a New Mutants, Teen Titans could have a new crossover, something like that. But for me, the one I'd like to see is Team X, which is Wolverine, Sabretooth, and Maverick, right? The Canadian team. I'd like to see them cross over, kind of like during their Canadian Black Ops days, with like a Snake Eyes G.I. Joe style mission, something like that. It could be, a team of a few Joes or whatever, going up against Cobra, because that's way more compelling to me than going. And plus, we get to see some Cobra people just absolutely get shredded.
Well, and that's the thing. If we can interact like between different companies and different universes, there's a lot I'd like to see. I would love to see, like a King Shark, Savage Dragon team up.
That'd be cool.
Crossover. Some of that kind of obscure sort of stuff from the indies.
Yeah.
Getting a little bit of a bump from, or you have King Shark and Jeff the Shark and, Savage Dragon or somebody, like, as a 3-piece, like, superhero A-team kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot of opportunity there if you don't put any of the traditional constraints on it.
Yeah, that's a good one. The and maybe they did cross over. Maybe I'm trying to think. I don't think they ever did. Vampirella and Lady Death would be another one I'd love to see for that kind of, metal.
They did a Dynamite did an event that I don't know if Vampirella and Lady Death were both in it, but I think they were. Might have been Lady Hell.
Okay, I'll try to track down.
Dynamite, I don't think has Lady Death. That's still at Coffin, so I don't think it's any of the books that they got. Yeah, so it was Lady Hell. It wasn't Lady Death. It was Dynamite's version of Lady Death.
Because in the 90s, when Evil Ernie and Lady Death were still under the same label, I could have seen something happening back then, maybe, or whatever. But Booster Gold was getting Leonard's kind of weighing in with Booster Gold. Interesting. Dude, I love Booster Gold. Like, Booster Gold is like the lamest character that I like. Like, he's at that perfect threshold of like just a goofball, but I still love seeing what he does. Let me see here. Oh yeah, buddy, Blue Jay and Agent Liberty sucked. They are both Justice League. Love it. See if I can get caught up to any new questions here.
Mark, yes, they did do a big brand mashup. I wouldn't really call it a crossover because they had all of those brands. But they definitely did a big multi-universe event. And my internet, it's not my house. Like, if I go home, I'm fine. It's my studio where I have fiber internet that just isn't working.
For sure. No, it's absolutely I just thought it was funny because it's true. The further you got away from the studio, the better it was getting. Eddie asks, do you know of a good bar scanner I can use to make a database of my comics? I want to make a list of them, but don't really want to type them out. I have like 30 short boxes full. Yes. Kyle?
I will warn you. Comics from before a certain time don't have barcodes.
Yep.
And so that is it. Right. And direct market editions don't. until a certain time. So there's going to be a level of, hey, I want to do this, I want to scan them. That would be great, but there's nothing to scan. So you're going to wind up either having to find pre-generated barcodes that other people have made for those books. Find when I was doing inventory for my store, you could create barcodes in certain apps that weren't tied to anything. That weren't because a barcode is a UPC code, and each of those black lines with each of those numbers contains data that when you sync it with an existing database will tell you what that thing is. You can make those where you just, so if it's Thor 126 or whatever, you just make the barcode say Thor 126. But I personally have always been a fan of whatever I can get for cheap from Amazon. The only time I've really gone out and spent big money was a real small barcode scanner that I could pair to my Square stand that I used for inventory and conventions and stuff. So I would just say if you're looking to create a database, go to like CLZ or one of those apps where the databasing already exists. That one.
Yep. That's what I was going to pull up. Not only that, if you create your database within CLZ, if you want to go that route, what Kyle said is totally true. When I went to go start scanning items, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot like how many comics don't have barcodes. But I would say easily half or more do. So it can speed things up a little bit. But yeah, they have your phone's camera or tablet or whatever you're going to use can scan books, and that you can create your database via CLZ, and you can export via CLZ as well to like a CSV file or something else like that, to where you can start to do your own database. I think that might be a good place to start, or like do a first pass maybe, because then you can copy the data that you export from that and input it into a custom format spreadsheet, whatever you're going to do, depending how serious you want to get. It's a great question. Collection management is a real problem for a lot of different collectors. And the other thing I'll say, kind of a teaser, because I'm not allowed to talk about who it is, but I know of another organization that is doing a collection management type software thing that is going to try to introduce a really cool barcode scanner. I won't even talk about what technology they're going to use, but it looks awesome, sounds awesome, and when I can talk about it, I definitely will. I'll say that much. So there's other stuff coming out too. So that's a great question.
Jay, would you type CLZ as in zebra, C as in Charles, L as in Lima, Z as in zebra? And I will say this. I know at one point, I don't know if they still are, CLZ was working on a camera filter, kind of like Google Glass, where you can scan it and it will recognize the cover.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're still doing that. I've moved away from CLZ once I got my collection built. I did exactly what Bronze was just kind of talking about. Exported it into a CSV and created my own web database that I like much better, but it's only for my collection. So it's not like I can even invite somebody to it.
And I will also say that I know some people might be like, I don't understand any of those words or acronyms you guys just said. If that's the case, and you do want to know more about that, it's the kind of stuff that we would talk about, like on my Discord server, for example, and I can link you to stuff like the different apps or different places we're talking about, or if you can be like, hey, does this barcode scanner look good? And you'll get other collectors kind of chiming in with what they do and get some kind of like crowdsourcing going on for how to figure out, what might work best for you as well. All right. So I just real fast, I just want to let you know, we're a little bit behind on chat. I'm definitely going to get to everything. But just let you know, we are moving. And then do we need to do an ad break?
Okay. Skip it.
Okay, cool.
I'm using my executive dysfunction. Wait, no, my executive power to make a decision.
I understood that reference. Flash would have been great, but it's been severely altered to fit in with James Gunn's vision. Interesting. Beef It.
See,
I don't know if it
that's not
actually
what
has.
I've heard, Beef It.
Yeah.
That's not at all what I've heard.
By the way, Beef It, great community member. I'm so glad to see you in the chat. Thanks for popping by. Yeah, it's one of those things where, from what I understand, the film has basically been more or less done for quite a while now. Now, is it possible that small details here and there may have been tweaked or whatever once James Gunn came on board? It's possible, but from what I understand, he was pretty freaking busy when he came in, and kind of, at least publicly, what I've kind of gotten the impression of is that they were letting that production team wrap up as they saw fit. And again, it's Elseworlds to them, so they kind of don't need to connect it to their continuity anyway.
Right.
Although they should
from
have.
The folks I know who have seen it say that it is kind of what we've been led to expect, but that there are things perhaps tagged on that have been added since the regime change.
That's what I would expect, because I mean, you could do some cool stuff. Just think about what Flashpoint is, right? And this is kind of a Flashpoint story in a way. You could do a lot of cool things to like make your new universe make sense, right? That it would exist. We didn't get a chance to say hi to you yet. Thanks for popping in. Hey, Matt Spidey, down from Australia. What is up, brother? Thanks for coming in here. Great to see you. And I should say Beef It from New Zealand. So we got the international viewers in the house.
Woo! I just hung out with an Aussie and a Kiwi this weekend.
Oh, there we go. Was it Matt Spidey and Beef It?
No, it was Ben Templesmith, and I don't remember the other person's name. I met them for the very first time. So
let me just pick up that name you dropped. No, just kidding.
I know. Eddie B, I prefer Car 54. Where are you?
Let's see here.
No, Martin Kaleba is not from New Zealand. He was there as well, but that was not it. It was a Kiwi comic artist, and I just don't, for the life of me, remember their name.
So some of the great comments, I'm going to skip over them in the interest of getting to some of the new questions that have come through. Superman versus Homelander, and I think you're saying you want Superman to beat the holy hell out of Homelander. The versus questions are always so much fun. The problem is that, okay, I'm a very literal person and a pragmatist. You're gonna have to tell me who's writing the story for me to be able to answer it correctly, because that's just how comic books work. However, if I'm the one writing in my own head, if you take the comic book version of Superman, he is going to annihilate the show version of Homelander. And I think that may be the matchup most people are picturing. If you take like the Christopher Reeve Superman or the Brandon Rouster, which is the same Superman technically, it's a continuation, or even the Man of Steel Superman, and you pit him against TV Homelander, that would be an interesting matchup. I believe it's been a while since I've read any, but I believe comic book Homelander is more powerful than TV show Homelander too. So it's one of those things where it really depends. I think since the logic that I would use for something like this is that pretty much, I hate to use the word ripoff because it's a subversion of the trope that is kind of Superman at this point. So I think it kind of elevates itself above a ripoff, but you do have the collection of characters that are basically, ripoffs of Superman, if you will, for the purposes of this argument. Omni-Man, the list goes on and on and on, right? Hyperion, whoever.
The best story about a versus argument I ever heard, or I've ever experienced. We were at C2E2 one year playing Super Fight in the lobby of the Hyatt. And some creator friends had come over, and come walking through the lobby are Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder, right when they were writing Batman. And we were arguing, the argument Super Fight drew up was who would win, Batman versus Superman. And, my comic creator friends flag Scott over and go, "What do you think, Scott?" And he goes, "Whoever the hell I pick, I'm writing the book." I go, you know what? I can't argue that logic, man.
I mean, look, technically, although I wouldn't say fought is the right word, but I remember like near the end of the Wolverine ongoing series run, volume 2, I guess, or whatever. you had Wolverine basically facing off against Galactus. Okay, that sounds ridiculous, and yes, it's ridiculous. But the whole point was he was trying to buy time to clear out. I think it was a prison planet. I can't remember what they were fighting over that Galactus was going to eat, right? And so you had this whole story where Wolverine basically just had to annoy Galactus for about 15 minutes, essentially, and he was able to do that, mostly by talking at him, right? That's the beauty of writing, and I'm sure that in a lot of ways, I don't know if that was Larry Hama that wrote that story. I can't remember at this point. Whoever wrote that was probably just thinking like, man, what's the craziest matchup I could have Wolverine go up against and have it be just like, can I write myself out of that corner?
Right.
And that's the beauty of it.
Absolutely.
Golden Age Justice Society and Invaders / Liberty Legion. Whew.
Golden Age Justice Society wins every time.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree on that, man. They're pretty damn powerful. Oh, that's cool, Mark. I didn't know that. A DC / Star Wars crossover comic event was going to happen at one point. Interesting.
I don't know how that would have worked, but I would have loved to have seen it.
Yeah, because
it would have had to be real early on, because the Star Wars comics came out so quickly after the movies that the conversation would have had to happen before the Star Wars comics went to Marvel, because Marvel and DC would have never done that. So then it could have happened conceivably in that middle period where it went from Marvel to Dark Horse.
Yeah, that's what I would guess.
Dark Horse and DC may have been able to get together.
Yeah. The interesting thing there would have been like Green Lanterns versus Jedi, maybe, or something might have been pretty cool.
Well, it would be your lantern colors versus teaming with your lightsaber colors.
Yeah.
So your Green Lanterns with your green lightsabers, Purple Lanterns with Mace Windu, Red Lanterns or Siths.
That'd be great. I mean, it'd be interesting. It's kind of like I mentioned X-Men and Star Trek earlier on different sides, but there was an X-Men Star Trek crossover, right? Like there's just weird stuff that happens in comic books. Vampirella Spawn, hard to believe that one hasn't happened yet. That would be pretty cool too. Or even conversely, Lady Death Spawn. They're both kind of in that same, wheelhouse. So number one Marvel fan says a true well done G.I. Joe and Transformers crossover in talks now, but man, if they did it right, would be awesome. Yeah, so in talks is looking more like it's more than in talks is all I'll say about it, from what I understand. So, and they've talked about it for a long time. Hasbro wanted to build a cinematic universe. I'm kind of happy that they didn't when they tried to, because they would have been trying to go full Bayverse, Height of Bay with some of their other properties. The G.I. Joe stuff, they needed to kind of let that simmer a little bit longer, I feel like, and kind of come up with some new ideas. But yeah, it would be cool. The original miniseries was something that will always live in my heart, because I was a fan of both franchises, and how could you not? That number one cover is so iconic, with Bumblebee just getting blasted to bits. Mark says, didn't IDW do a big crossover? G.I. Joe, Transformers, ROM, Mask? Yeah.
I mentioned that. Yep.
100%. And then, Mask is another one that has been talked about being produced for live action for a while. Don't know how well that would really translate, but it'd be interesting, I guess.
I don't know how much interest there would be.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, you gotta stop living on nostalgia for some of these properties, right? Like, if you make a good movie, it doesn't matter that it came from a comic book to some extent,
right?
But
like, Mask is one of those that, beyond the people who watched it when it was an animated series, it wouldn't have a lot of built-in fan base, right? So they would have to sell it really, really, really well.
Yeah.
And they could, but I just don't know in the end that in today's cinematic market that there would be much interest for Mask. Now,
yeah,
if they could do a mask rom kind of space opera thing, you might be able to build yourself something, that kind of hits on that same crowd that's into like Ender's Game and some of that kind of stuff. But it's going to be a tough fit.
Yeah.
The people saying that it looks like I'm doing a Bohemian Rhapsody in my car. If I turn my head around, it gets even better.
And yeah, agree. Number one Marvel fan, Booster Gold. There is a adaptation coming, and I am excited to see that personally. I thought it was a movie, but yeah, definitely exciting. Oh my God, Preston, pull of the show right here. Harris Comics did a Vampirella versus Lady Death comic. Preston, that is awesome news. That'll be something I hunt for after this show. And then we typed out the CLZ. Great. That's good.
Number one Marvel fan is back to the bar scan system.
Yeah,
man, that was my problem. Is that I dealt when my store was open regular, and I wasn't doing just conventions. I dealt primarily in gold, silver, and early Bronze Age books. I didn't really deal a ton in modern for the last 3 years in my store, and it became a real problem of trying to inventory things. So I had to come up with other methods, come up with other tricks to be able to do that. And it just, it's a pain in the neck.
Yeah. Looks like Mark's going back to the Superman versus Homelander question, which probably not going back. You were probably talking about it when we were talking about it. So that's the thing is like the only real advantage that Homelander has is that he's willing to do anything, right? Like
he's crazy.
Yeah. So like if there's, this is what you'd use as a writer, I think. Like you can have him zoom off and go grab Lois or something like that, right? And then you're kind of into that injustice kind of scenario because that he's willing to kill her. Like that's not a problem for him. Or innocent people. It doesn't really matter. You can kind of insert whatever you want. That's like the one. Can Superman account for a not a bloodlusted, but like just kind of a insane individual,
someone with no scruples.
Exactly. Yeah, agreed, Eddie. Anthony Starr does an amazing job.
I have not watched The Boys.
It is a very interesting show that reminds me of like a modern take. I mean, if you know the story already, then you know the story. But I think it's presented.
I have a very interesting relationship with the comics, in that I love them, but they're also comics. They're not comics that I can read over and over and over again.
Yep.
And because I can't reread the comics over and over and over again, I don't need to relive them in live action on a show.
I will say that it seems like most people, maybe this is the popular opinion, a lot of people say the show's better than the comic, and I did not read much of the comic, so I can't really like speak to that one way or the other, but maybe it's just they enjoy that interpretation more. Let's see here. George Reeve versus Homelander. Yeah, that would be an interesting one. I think Homelander would probably take that one. Try to see if we have any other questions here. Robotech versus G.I. Joe. That, man, how about the inverse of that question too? Robotech versus Transformers. That'd be interesting.
Well, Macross versus Transformers, but yes.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know how to.
Sure.
I got nothing.
I was in a superhero burnout from all the movie shows. Boys broke that for me because it was that I think the timing of when the show came out had a lot to do with its success and hooking people, because it was kind of like post Game of Thrones, where that kind of really violent, head squishy kind of stuff came out, and people were like, okay, if it's told in the right story, then I can deal with this. And then plus it was kind of like maybe at the beginning of superhero movie fatigue, kind of starting to set in. Is kind of, a lot of people were like, oh, another movie, wow, okay. And I think that had a lot to do with how it basically succeeded.
And I think a lot of that stuff that hit during COVID, like just like you were talking about burnout, to have something during a time when we were likely to have nothing was really nice. And I like that for people. So.
Yep, 100%. We get a question from producer Jay here. Says, do either of you think that subverting expectations is kind of played out at this point? And says, Ed, you should watch Invincible. I will say that subverting expectations is as just a gimmick is played out. That doesn't mean that it can't still be successful. It's another storytelling tool that's like, kind of in a writer's work, work belt or utility belt, whatever you want to call it. And that it can definitely still be used to some success. I think, if you look at some of the subversion of expectations, like we're talking about Superman clones, right? There's a lot of those at this point. If you come out with another Superman clone, boy, you better have something really original to tell with that character. But the beauty of it is you still can have something original to tell with that kind of character. That is still 100% possible. And Ed, I agree. You should watch Invincible because or just go read the comics. Either way, here's an example where I think the show did better than the comic book. Robert Kirkman very heavily involved with the show as well. They made and I won't say why because it sounds like it hasn't watched it yet. They made a switch kind of like when events happen, like the order in which they happen, so that something you didn't learn till later on in the comics, you learn up front. That's what I'll say. And I think that was a great adaptation choice, like a great editorial choice to make that story more interesting and flow better. Fantastic show. Great comic book. I binged it in like 2 months.
My answer for this question is I'm still waiting for someone to actually subvert my expectations. I've been reading comics for so long. I've been doing this for so long. I've been around for so long that everything is predictable. Right? Like if I get a new comic series I like, eventually it's going to fall into a trope that I've read before and I can figure out where it's going.
Yeah.
There are some great examples of that have just come out. Things like Harrower by Justin Jordan, Where Monsters Lie. Some of these things that really have done the work. But when it comes especially to the pop culture side of it, movies, TV shows, adaptations, nothing has. And the unfortunate thing about that is it makes me cynical, I guess. So if you're going to subvert expectations, you need to actually do it and subvert everyone's. You can't just be like, okay, we're going to just use that tool for the normies who don't know anything.
Yeah.
And so that's my problem. And I will third the watch of Invincible. It wasn't my favorite comic and it wasn't my favorite comic adaptation, but it was certainly a great example of how to do one properly.
Yeah. The subversion of expectations thing, that my favorite example of it being done in a way that I personally did not enjoy, but I think it was well done, is The Last Jedi. I feel like Rian Johnson, after the criticisms of Force Awakens being a 1-to-1 kind of story remake of A New Hope, essentially went in and said, I'm going to take every story beat from Empire and from what you expect from this movie from being a follow-up, and I'm going to flip it on its head. And I think that was very interesting. I didn't enjoy that particular interpretation of that, but I found it fascinating to watch, because as I'm sitting through the movie, I'm like, okay, I see what's going on here. I see like the idea that like I'm not going to play into the fantasy that fans want from this movie. I'm going to go ahead and flip that a little bit at every opportunity while still kind of playing to that formula. Interesting one.
I don't think you can, and I also don't think you can subvert expectations in something like Star Wars or in something like The Batmans. or in something like where there's this pre-existing canonical, this is exactly how you're supposed to fill in the formula. When you have something that's been around as long as those things have, you have to do the math. You can't invent new math. And so I think if you're going to do it, you have to do it in a Star Wars series like they did in Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Or you have to do it in a comic book series. You can't do it in these big kind of set pieces, as it were. So,
yeah, interesting take on it too, for sure. We are getting one last great question here. If I see any other quick ones, we'll definitely jump in on them. But this is a fantastic question, Mark. Mark says, do you think Moon Knight Season 2 should go full on Marvel horror? Werewolf by Night appearance, living mummy appearance, etc. Man, that is a cool question. And I think one of the coolest things that Marvel Cinematic anything has done recently was the Werewolf by Night special. Talking about kind of a subversion of expectations there, going black and white and kind of going for this kind of smaller story that was all horror based, really kind of successful in that way. And I think Marvel needs to embrace the horror. I don't know if Moon Knight is the correct lens for that. I feel like they keep wanting Blade to be the jumping off point for some of the horror stuff. But I think those guys can play, in the same ballpark pretty well too. I think Marvel definitely needs darker, grittier, and more serious stories though for their movies. So if it's an excuse to get that, sure. I also, maybe this is a hot take, I don't want Moon Knight Season 2. I want them to do a full feature if they're going to do anything else with that character. And I also don't think they need to necessarily do anything else with that character. But if they're going to, I don't know. I don't know that I want Season 2 of that show. And if they do, they better do it right. That's my opinion. What do you think?
yeah, I'm in the we don't need a Season 2 camp. I didn't particularly love Moon Knight. It's just not a character I've ever connected with. It's ever really resonated with me. So watching the show, I only watched the show because it was like my job, right? Like I had to.
Yeah.
So for me to say this is what they should do with Moon Knight would be disingenuous. I felt like the story they told was a good story. It wrapped up the way it should wrap up. If they want to tell more story like that, more power to them. People really loved it. Wasn't for me. I would much rather them spend more time making the single shot specials like the Werewolf by Night special or the Guardians Christmas special or what have you. Take that time and energy and make one shot really great movies, or short movies, specials.
Yeah.
And I think you're gonna win more than you lose doing that. But I would love to see some more of those classic Marvel stories too, like Living Mummy, like I'm gonna blank on his name. You're gonna have to help me. J. Jonah Jameson's kid, the werewolf guy.
Oh yeah, Manwolf.
Manwolf.
Yeah.
I can't believe I couldn't think of Manwolf.
It's all good. You've had a long weekend for those watching home.
I'm looking at my trip meter. I've driven 682 miles since Friday morning. So, but yeah,
that's a good one.
I would love to see some of that stuff, but do Halloween. Somebody mentioned in the comments Halloween specials. Do one-offs. Do small, contained, perfect.
Yeah.
Don't worry about throwing it into a series and then being like, okay, now how do we write ourselves out of this paper bag?
Now, I will say that I enjoyed Moon Knight more than the average audience seems to have enjoyed it. So it's not that I feel like they wrote a complete story almost in a lot of ways, and they didn't. It was really obvious when they made it. They like, well, we're probably not going to do more of this. And now it feels like they're going to revisit that probably because they feel like they need more big name actors like Oscar Isaac back in the MCU is my gut feeling on that. Like, I think they feel like that's such a cool actor that we have to have him around.
Right.
But yeah, it's one of those things where I hope that if they're going to continue it, do it right. Please, by all means, bring in more of that horror stuff, though.
Absolutely.
And I have not read Fool Killer, so I will add that to my list. You haven't read it?
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
No, I've read it.
All right.
It's one of those that kind of exists in a moment. Like there are characters that Marvel has, like Fool Killer and Slapstick and Four Bush Man, and some of these characters that I equate to being the Steve Miller band of comics, which is not successful, not successful, not successful. A moment happens and they pop off, and it leads to them existing for a while and becoming successful. That said, when that moment passes, that moment has passed.
Yeah.
So while I think Fool Killer is a cool character, while I think Slapshot is a cool character, or Slapstick is a cool character, while I think some of these characters are fun to play with, put them in a Deadpool movie, put them in an X-Men movie, put them in a Fantastic Four movie. Put them somewhere else where they can just be a side piece. Don't build a world around a character that only has one story that's interesting.
Good take. Let's see. I think that was the last question I saw. Oh, we do have one last tiny one here. Did the Joker subvert your expectations at all? My answer to that is no, but I could see where it might have subverted some people's expectations. Actually, seeing what that movie was from the trailer, I got pretty much exactly what I expected. I liked what I got out of it, but that was what I expected personally. And then, yeah. Oh,
yeah. It I don't like it. A lot of people love that movie. Couldn't stand it. That's not the Joker that I know and love and have loved for my entire life. That's an actor that I really am not a fan of. There was a lot happening in that movie that turned me off to that movie. That said, Jay always has to help me with that dude's name. The guy who made the Joker and the guy who made the Batman. Those two guys.
Matt Reeves made the Batman. The Joker was, and I'm blanking on the
Todd
name.
Phillips.
Yes, thank you.
Give them the keys and let them do stuff. Like, it's a unique and interesting take. Just because it isn't for me doesn't mean it isn't good.
Yeah. And look, I enjoyed the Joker for what it was. I will say, though, it is not even in my top 2 favorite Joker performances. I mean, my number 1, it's very obvious. It's Heath Ledger so far. It just killed it. The Joker I want to see now is more like give me the Mark Hamill-esque interpretation of the Joker. Look, we've had the serious, gritty Joker. We had the Jack Nicholson kind of like sarcastic, cynical Joker.
Joker from Harley Quinn the animated series is my number 2. It's Heath Ledger, Harley Quinn the animated series Joker, and then it's probably 1966 Batman Joker. Like,
yeah,
it's one of those things. Is I think handing those guys the keys and letting them do stuff would be smart of James Gunn. But I don't know what his view or what his view from 30,000 feet is of how these Elseworld things are going to work.
Yeah, for sure. So looks like I'm wrapping up. Most of the questions that we had come through the chat. I just want to take a second near the end of the show here to point out that we do have a form over on the EXP website, so that you can go and drop us show ideas. So if something we said tonight sparked an idea of like, hey, it'd be cool to hear them talk about different movies that could happen or whatever it might be, right? Go and drop us a line, or you can let us know here in chat too, of course. We always love taking your suggestions on what you guys actually want to hear us talk about. it's pretty good way to stay in touch with what you guys are looking for. And you can hit us up, all of our socials as well too, if you're looking for any suggestions you want to get through on topics for future shows. Let's see. Okay, no other questions came through at the end there, so I think that's probably a pretty good stopping point. What do you think, Kyle? Sounds good. Kyle,
great.
Many
Eventually,
miles.
Eventually, the cops are gonna come bother me in this library parking lot, so we should wrap up sooner rather than later.
That's good. Before you turn into a real life Batman villain.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys.
Be like, no, I just didn't want to stream and be driving at the same time. That seems reckless.
That seems like a perfect excuse to not get a huge ticket or something.
Right.
Thanks everybody for coming in and being part of our first AMA. Maybe as time goes on, this is something we'll try again later down the road. So always don't be afraid to ask them those questions in future shows. Remember, you can call into our show too, and we'll have some open question sessions during those as well, because we'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Thanks so much, everybody, for being a part of this show, and thanks, Kyle, for struggling through your internet problems.
I'm sorry, everybody. Like I said, it's been a long day, and that did not make it any shorter. So I apologize on behalf of T-Mobile and myself for the Bohemian Rhapsody of it all, the using the car overhead lights to light my face. Like, it's been a thing.
A huge shout out to public libraries.
Absolutely. Support your local library.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks a lot for coming in, everybody. If you're watching on the rewind, don't be afraid to drop us a like and all that fun stuff too. If you enjoy my content, you can go check me out over on the Bronze Age Nerd YouTube channel. If you're a fan of what you're seeing here because you came to watch me talk to Kyle, and you're a fan of what's going on here at the XP, make sure you like and subscribe over here as well. And don't forget to ring the bell. Have a good night.
Join the party. Head over to our link tree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.